Winter in the Netherlands. Dismal, bleak, little snow, less ice, and not as cold as in the old days. A disappointment to the Dutch. We're a winter people, we Dutch. Nothing we like better than snow and ice, and the things we can do on it. Especially skating. It's the favorite sport here, not just racing either. The favorite event, in fact, is a skating tour through the northern province of Friesland, along a cross-country course touching 11 of its ancient cities. The 11 cities. If it's Dutch, it's organized, and that includes the 11 Cities Tour. An all-day event involving 16,000 skaters, it needs an organization. It needs a lot of ice too, and this year the organizers say there isn't enough, at least not yet. And there's too much snow.
Het ijs is de afgelopen dagen goed aangegroeid. De kwaliteit.
They're optimistic though, and ready to give nature a helping hand.
Maar met behulp van veel vrijwilligers is de kwaliteit toch aanzienlijk verbeterd.
Volunteers, part of an army of volunteers tidying up the ice along the canals and lakes of the 200-kilometer course. A big job, a lot of energetic effort. Why? Well, it's the winter of 1985, and there hasn't been an 11 cities tour, an Elfstedentocht, as we Dutch would call it, since 1963. Little snow, less ice. Will there be one this year? The news conference where the organizers will announce their decision, and more journalists on hand than for the coronation of the Dutch Queen. The answer? Bad news.
Voor de komende dagen zullen leiden tot een situatie waarin het niet verantwoord is.
Not only is the ice unsafe, but a thaw is forecast. An old story as far as the 11 Cities Tour is concerned. Since its organization in 1908, in fact, it's been cancelled more times, 14, than it's been run, 12. A record of some kind, no doubt. Winter in the Netherlands. Not as cold as in the old days. A disappointment to the Dutch. And then, finally, ice. It's 3 weeks later. Cold that has crippled half of Europe has frozen Friesland solid. Solid enough for an 11 cities tour? The thickness of 15 centimeters, which, for safety reasons, the organizers insist on? "16 centimeters, he says. When does it start? How do I sign on? 11 cities fever is setting in. They won't cancel again, will they?
En de tijd wordt nog nader bekendgemaakt. Dan moet u zijn bij de Frieslandhal in Leeuwarden. Bij diverse verenigingen in het land, maar ik ga me de raad geven. Aanzien dat het morgen de dagbladen die vroegen mensen
De voorzitter van het...
The answer, when it comes, is the lead story on the National Evening News. A historic moment, says the anchorman.
Een historische beslissing heeft genomen.
Uitgaande van 4 nachten strenge vorst die we nodig hadden.
The 11 Cities Tour, the first in 22 years, is set for Thursday, February 21st. Just 2 days away. The fever becomes an epidemic. It's time for participants to sign in, even if it means a night in a sleeping bag outside registration rooms. Only 16,000 skaters can take part. Whether men, women, boys or girls, it's first come, first served. Flashlights? Good idea. It starts in the dark, the 11 Cities tour, and the course isn't lit. Here's a would-be participant who forgot his skates. Hey, can you rent skates around here?
Fahnen, sjaals, stickers. Wie naar Fahnen, sjaals, stickers.
De eerste keer, toen ging het...
The event's a little more organized. Even the Dutch Air Force has a hand in things.
Maar toen vlogen we 5 meter hoog.
Ja.
Skaters and fans pour into Leeuwarden, capital of Friesland province, home base for the 11 Cities tour. Organizational machinery is grinding everywhere. The tour may start in Leeuwarden, but it covers a lot of ground before 200 kilometers later it ends in the same place. This is the finish line in an event which for some participants is a race, 277 to be precise. About 1 million spectators are expected, and one task for police is crowd and traffic control. Ambulances will line the route, and first aid posts, one every 16 kilometers. The long-awaited spectacle will be covered live all day long on Dutch television, starting at 5 a.m. The 11 Cities race and tour, a sort of Dutch Kentucky Derby, with the Super Bowl thrown in. Some call it the greatest, the toughest steeplechase in history. It's killed 3 contenders in the past, mutilated hundreds more through frostbite, packed hospital wards with cases of broken arms, legs, hips, ankles, heads, wrists. Yet Dutch skaters still clamor by the thousands to take part.
Links. Hier is de leiding.
Ja.
Dus ik bedoel, gaat u daar even naartoe? Dan kun je daar even informatie in winnen. Dus kijk maar omhoog. Kijk maar
Racers, 277 men like this, have trained all year round for years for an event that hardly ever happens.
Dit moeten we nou inleveren.
Ik denk het wel een klein nummer. Zo. Dat is het mooiste nummer wat je even kan weten, hè? 2 keer 1. Wij dan ook goed bevrijd zijn van de zenuwen.
Maar dat lopen heb je natuurlijk nog.
Je moet naar zoveel lopen, dus je kunt beter heel Friesland doorlopen.
The big day. Long before dawn, most of Europe still huddled under blankets, asleep. Friesland Hall in Leeuwarden, where the 11 towns race and tour begins. The races start before the tours.
Het eerste stuk hier? Ja, het loopt eruit. Nee, ik geloof niet dat... Als het voor de topmensen is, moeilijk. Ja.
20 seconden voor de start. Het is mijn laatste.
For the racers, assembled behind fencing, the starting shot will sound at 5:30 a.m. and they'll be off on a mile-long run before they reach the ice. Winter in the Netherlands. Not as cold as in the old days, but dismal, bleak, not for them. And not for the tourers either. For them, it's not winning, but just completing the punishing 200-kilometer course. Each who does gets a little silver cross, an Elfstedenkruisje, a sort of Dutch red badge of courage, something to tell the grandchildren about. They're released in groups of 1,000 every 15 minutes. Sneek, the first of the 11 cities, 22 kilometers from the start. The front runners arrive, get their cards stamped at the checking station. No stamp, no victory. A short dash across a dike or street, and there's the ice again. And the darkness. It's about 8 a.m., daybreak, 2.5 hours into the all-day event. And some tourers are still starting. Not all can leave at once, or the ice would give way. The tourers who left earlier and the racers are now strung out 84 kilometers along the course to Hindelopen, the fourth of the 11 cities. The first the racers can see if they take the time to look. It's an hour later before the first tourers reach the town. A once thriving port on the former Zuiderzee, now landlocked, Hindelopen is over 700 years old. No point in packing your own lunch for this trip. Drink will freeze solid, sandwiches turn to rock. And resting too long can be crippling. The racers again, nearly 100 kilometers into the event. As the pace quickens, speeds up to 40 and 50 kilometers per hour, it's tempo that gets you there, looking for an opening and taking it. Some of the early front runners are no longer in front. The raised drawbridge means a road out of service, but who cares on the day of the 11 cities race and tour? Which is now approaching Bolsward, the seventh of the cities. The skaters have to leave the ice, by the way, at the many points where it's weak. The mats and rugs help keep those skate blades sharp. The tours, some of the 16,000, follow along a pace, albeit a slower pace. Again, the race. It's 9:40 a.m., approaching the North Sea port of Harlingen now, city number 8. The two frontrunners look a little lost, and that's one of the hazards in this event. In the 11 cities race in 1940, the 20 top contenders skated off in the dark to the wrong town. The right way this time is up and over Harlingen's main street. Whoops. The racers skate in packs, cooperatively changing place at the front where the pace is set. It's keep up or drop out. Approaching the finish, of course, it's every racer for himself. The winner today will soon emerge from this group of a dozen front runners. They're already well ahead of the record for the 200-kilometer run. Set in 1954, it was 7 hours 35 minutes. Schools close the day an 11 cities race and tour is held. Ice-free, the kids call it. Free, too, for the thousands of spectators on hand in this tiny hamlet, home ordinarily for no more than a few dozen people. The stretch of ice they call the cemetery, the gateway to Dokkum, the northernmost and 10th of the 11 cities. It's where many would-be winners have called it quits. Just 4 front runners now, paced by a motorcycle camera team. Dokkum, 11:30 p.m. The front runners get their cards stamped at the checking station. Then it's right back the way they came. No big problem now, but in the old days when the course ran north in the dark and Dokkum was the first city to reach, this might have been a painful collision. And this head-on at a rate of closure of 80 to 100 kilometers per hour. The last leg of the event now, and the ice, as you can see, is beginning to thaw. Leeuwarden, the 11th city, where an eternity ago it all began. The crowds have been on hand for hours for the finish. And here's the Dutch Queen arriving. Royalties traditionally on hand for this event, and the Dutch Prime Minister. The four frontrunners round the last bend in the twisting course. Victory's less than a minute away. But for whom? What's the one on the left, in back? Now he's second. Now he's in front. The winner! He's Evert van Bentum, a dairy farmer, 26 years old. In circumstances like this in 1963, the winner, the Queen and the press corps nearly sank through the ice. More racers reach the finish. It's been a relatively easy run, a pushover compared to some in the past. No serious casualties, no wind, no blinding snow, and temperatures almost friendly. But an ordeal nevertheless. An ordeal that for thousands of skaters is still going on. It's ducking obstacles, sidestepping holes, staying on your feet, balancing an entire day on steel blades 1.5 millimeters thick. But it's fun too, fun for the fittest, as it has been since the 19th century, over 100 years back, before the tour got organized, before it became a race as well. In this village, a welcome mat 250 meters long. Winter in the Netherlands. It was this Dutch province, by the way, that Peter Stuyvesant, the first governor of New York, came from. And an even more illustrious American, John Adams, the second president of the United States, actually made an 11 cities tour. Not on skates, though. It was a business trip. He was here seeking Dutch support for the American Revolutionary War. Winter in the Netherlands. It's 5 p.m. and getting dark. And still they come, the thousands. The winter people. To wind down at the wind-up of their first tour in 22 years. All for a little silver cross, the Elfstedenkruisje, a sort of Dutch red badge of courage.
Goed? Tweede, ja. Goed. Piet is voor mij. Hé, oh, ik ben er weer, man. Goed zo. Willen jullie weer een beetje vrijmaken? Zeg, een beetje vrijmaken. Otto! Een beetje vrijmaken. Papa. Papa is er nou. Oh, goed zo. Hé, bestempeld? Nee, ik ben er daar niet.
It wasn't organized in the old days. It was done in pairs and trios, not en masse. Humble origins for what the winter people now call their monster marathon, the 11 Cities Race and Tour.
Maar ja, we hebben het record van Paping verbeterd. Dat was 10:59.
Darkness falls on Dokkum. It's 6 p.m. Skaters are still strung out along the course as far back as Bolsward, 75 kilometers away. In the old days, it was innkeepers who did this job, signing name, place, and date to the letters the skaters carried. The thaw's in full swing now, meaning this 11 Cities tour came just in the nick of time.
Bedankt meneer.
It'll be 12 p.m. before the last skater reaches Leeuwarden. And here's a scene from an old Dutch painting. But where's today's big winner? And if there's a winner, does that make the thousands still skating losers? Hardly. In an event which was a tour long before it became a race, you're a winner if you finish. Over 13,000 skaters reached the finish of this tour, a record. But now, ladies and gentlemen, I give you our record breaker, Evert van Bentum, the winner in 1985 of the 13th race of the 11 Cities.